Sea creatures are inspiring the latest devices that harness wave power. This one called the Oyster sits on the sea floor and opens and closes as waves pass over it. Cables attach it to generators on the shore. Since November 2009, it's been powering 9,000 homes in the Orkney Islands. Another device looks like a snake. The Anaconda is made from a rubber tube filled with water that floats just below the surface. When the swell hits the front of it, the tube squeezed above ripples down its links and power a turbine in its tail. Prototypes are currently being tested, but the full-scale version will be 2,000 meters long. This system also looks like a snake. But this one is made of steel. It floats near the surface, where waves make its joints move. This drive hydraulic system that power electrical generators, like the Anaconda. It's still being tested. Results will prove that these devices are up to the job of supplying variable sources of green energy. Now many devices are simulating sea creatures. The first device simulates oysters, which float in the sea by using the energy from the wave. The second is the Anaconda device operating like snakes, which create energy by spraying water in the tube. The third is also based on snakes, but made of steel, creating electrical energy that is a kind of green power.
Now, the study of biology is responsible for some of the most profounding insights that humans have about the world around them. So, take a look at these four panoramas. In the upper left, you see some bacteria. This happens to be equal line. You obviously see a butterfly, a flower, a dolphin. If you see that at outer space, just look these different forms and structures. You have no idea that they were all related to one to another. So, one of the most profound things that biology told us is that all life on Earth is exceptionally related, similar to one to another. So, for example, all of these life forms rely on DNA and RNA for storing and transmitting and using their genetic and inherited information. They are all based on cells. A cell is the fundamental building block of all life. All of these organisms consist of cells, and the cells essentially have the same chemicals inside of them: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen and nitrogen, and a whole bunch of other stuff and much smaller amount. All these organisms conducted metabolism, in other words, chemical reactions that using convert energy from one form to another. And the basic chemistry is all very similar to one and another. The types of molecule is used very similar to one and another.
Listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class. The professor is talking about stating laws in the science of psychology.
Psychology is a relatively new science. Like other sciences, psychology must be able to state laws. A law is a way of organizing knowledge about something so that we can make predictions. When enough knowledge is gained about a subject, a scientist can state precisely what will happen under certain conditions. We experimental psychologists are interested in developing laws about human behavior, so we'll be able to understand and predict what people do and why they do it. Of course, to develop laws about human behavior, we must assume there's some regularity to it. We can't be psychologists without making the assumption that behavior follows certain patterns. One of the major laws psychologists have discovered is called the law of effect. The law of effect states that whether or not a person will repeat a behavior depends on the effect that behavior has. If an action is rewarded, it's likely to be repeated. If the action is not rewarded, or if it's punished, it's not likely to be repeated. How do psychologists state laws? First, using available knowledge, a psychologist makes a hypothesis about behavior. Then, the psychologist tests the hypothesis through an experiment. But even if the experiment proves the hypothesis, land animals move easily through air because air does not slow them down. Sea creatures, on the other hand, have to move through water, which is hundreds of times thicker than air. A sea animal has to push itself through water in order to move. Sea animals use many different ways to swim, creep, or glide through water. Fish are able to swim by bending their bodies into waves. They have flattened fins and tails that push against the water like oar blades, converting their body waves into forward movement. The size of a fish's tail contributes to its swimming speed. Small tail fins are found in slow swimmers like the eel. The medium-sized tail of the bass is linked with a medium to fast swimming speed. Long pointed tail lobes like those on the marlin are found only on fast swimmers. Sea mammals like whales and dolphins swim in a very fish-like way, except for one important difference. Because their ancestors lived on the land, they developed tails that moved up and down. Whales and dolphins wave their tails up and down rather than side to side like fish do. The seahorse is a fish whose tail is not used for swimming at all. The seahorse uses its thin, coiled tail to attach itself to seaweed, like a monkey's tail holds onto a tree branch. Squids and octopuses move in a completely different way. They use a type of jet propulsion, shooting water out.
Biology is considered one of the natural sciences. It is the science of life and life's processes. And like life, science is better understood by observing it than by trying to create a precise definition. Over the next 15 weeks, we will be observing the science of biology. In many ways, biology is the most demanding of all sciences. This is partly because living systems are so complex. Biology is also a multidisciplinary science. It requires knowledge of chemistry, physics, and mathematics. And of all the sciences, biology is the most linked to the social sciences and humanities. The word science comes from a Latin verb meaning to know. Science is a way of knowing. It emerges from our curiosity about ourselves and our world. Striving to understand is one of our basic drives. Who are scientists? Scientists are people who ask questions about nature and who believe that these questions can be answered. Scientists are explorers who are passionate about discovery. This course has something for all of you to discover. If you're a biology major or a pre-medical student, you'll discover ways to become a better scientist. If you're a physical science or engineering major, you'll discover in biology many applications for what you've learned in your other science courses.
Did anyone happen to catch the American Metropolis last night? It was about the growth of cities.
I didn't see that, but I did see part of a documentary last week that told about a guy, I think he was a visitor from another country, who wrote a book about the growth of industry and so on, the things we've just studied. I remember he said there was a huge population explosion that turned America into a nation of cities all within a decade. He was talking mostly about Baltimore.
Baltimore then or now?
In the 19th century, right after the Civil War.
The program you saw was part of the same series as the one I want to tell you about. Last night the topic was New York City. As early as 1880, the federal government wrote a report on how the 5 separate municipalities of New York actually constituted one vast metropolitan area. It was a progressive way of thinking at the time, and within 20 years, those 5 municipalities were officially united as a single city by a vote of the people. To this day, however, each borough maintains traces of its original independence.
I agree with that. I'm from Brooklyn, and it's definitely different from the rest of New York.
If sea levels continue to rise, eventually the property becomes inundated and the real value of the property, the vast bulk of its value, will be in the value of the land, which of course is then unusable. And that's of course not insured by property insurance. So at that point, a lot of waterfront landowners and banks and other financial institutions that have lent money against the value of those properties are going to find that they suffer very serious losses, and it's not at all obvious at the moment who would compensate them.
And one particular crop, almonds in the US and now in Australia, is transforming the world of beekeeping and of bees. What has happened is that something serendipitous came along, that people found out, that doctors found out, that almonds are good for you. They are actually a food that is normally considered a confection, but it's good for you. The almond board got a very aggressive promotion going on for almonds. I just heard recently, they send out sales reps to cardiologists at hospitals to promote the heart benefits of almonds, so they go right to the doctors to do this. So they leave no stone unturned in a very good promotion of almonds, and it's legitimate promotion because they are a healthy food. So what's happened is worldwide, almond sales have taken off.
Certainly, I do think that by the end of this decade, the largest social institution in Australia will be single-person households, so that the family, mum, dad, and the kids, is receiving in terms of market share. So less than 28% of households are now mum, dad, and the kids, whereas by the end of the decade you'll see that 29% of households are single-person households. Now the issue with single-person households is that people are looking for companionship, and as a consequence people living singly will include increasingly pets as their companions. So you could see in Australia, in the next decade, where the fur family, the pet family, actually becomes the dominant social institution in Australia, rather than the human family.
There's little doubt that genetically modified crops have the potential to offer great benefits to the world, yet they continue to be opposed by many people, even though any risks attached to their use have not been clearly established. The reasons seem to be a deep distrust of the motives of large agricultural companies, along with a generalized feeling that it's always dangerous to, as some would put it, play around with nature.
An economist sees the world basically through a typical microeconomic toolkit that involves things like thinking at the margin, rationality, opportunity cost, trade-offs. Economists, like any other discipline or dogma, has its own jargon and its own rules and its own way of seeing the world. So basically economics, or economists in general, tend to apply microeconomic concepts like that to explain the way humans behave and to make predictions about the future.
Drums can be divided according to shape. Some of the types are tubular, vessel, and frame drums. One of the most common tubular drums is the long drum. A lot of long drums are cylindrical. They have the same diameter from top to bottom, like this Polynesian drum. This drum was carved from a length of tree trunk and has a single skin head. For vessel drums, we have the kettle drum. Kettle drums have a single membrane stretched over a pot or vessel body. Vessel drums come in a variety of sizes, from the very large drums of Africa to the very compact and portable drums, like this one from Hawaii. The third type I want you to see is the frame drum. A frame drum consists of one or two membranes stretched over a simple frame, which is usually made of thin.
Land animals move easily through air because air does not slow them down. Sea creatures, on the other hand, have to move through water, which is hundreds of times thicker than air. A sea animal has to push itself through water in order to move. Sea animals use many different ways to swim, creep, or glide through water. Fish are able to swim by bending their bodies into waves. They have flattened fins and tails that push against the water like oar blades, converting their body waves into forward movement. The size of a fish's tail contributes to its swimming speed. Small tail fins are found in slow swimmers like the eel. The medium-sized tail of the bass is linked with a medium to fast swimming speed. Long pointed tail lobes like those on the marlin are found only on fast.
Classified advertisements placed by individuals in newspapers and magazines are not covered by the Advertising Standards Authority's Code of Practice. If you happen to buy goods that have been wrongly described in such an advertisement and have lost money as a result, the only thing you can do is bring a case against the person who placed the advertisement for misrepresentation or for breach of contract. In this case, you would use the small claims procedure, which is a relatively cheap way to sue for the recovery of a debt. If you want to pursue a claim, you should take into account whether the person you are suing will be able to pay damages, should any be awarded. Dishonest traders are aware of this and often pose as private sellers to exploit the legal loopholes that exist. That is, they may claim they are not in a position to pay damages.
In the 19th century, few people could afford to travel abroad. It was expensive, and there weren't the mass transport systems that we have today. So curiosity about foreign lands had to be satisfied through books and drawings. With the advent of photography, a whole new dimension of reality became available. Publishers were not slow to realize that here was a large new market of people hungry for travel photography, and they soon had photographers out shooting the best-known European cities, as well as more exotic places further away. People bought the pictures by the millions, and magic lantern shows were presented in schools and lecture halls. Most popular of all, however, was the stereoscopic picture, which presented three-dimensional views and was considered a marvel of Victorian technology.
Essays and assignments spread out across the academic year. Food containing too many calories provides little or no nutritional value.
Participation rate in the study of language learning exceeded the expectations.
You can contact oil traders by email. Resources and materials are on hold on the library reference desk.
The university provides different excellence of facilities for students and staff.
All industries can be thought of a system as input, process, output and feedback. Financial help for undergraduate study is available on application.